Executive Director of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization. So just a quick couple things. If you're not a member, it's important for organizations like NY-GEO to have a strong membership base. You as members are the voice of our industry, and when we go out and advocate for the things that we do, the more members we have, the louder our voices are. So if you're not a member, please consider joining. If you know somebody that's not a member, maybe hit them up and ask them to join, and I'll drop some links into chat in just a bit. In addition to the the Lunch and Learn program, we do a Let's Talk every other Friday that JR hosts. That program is really meant for an opportunity to bring our members together to chat about things that might be on their mind, get other people's input, and occasionally we'll have our board attend and let you guys know what's going on in our industry within our board structure. Our next conference is April 26th to 28th in Saratoga Springs. It will be a 2-day conference with a pre-conference activities including geothermal site tours, drilling demonstrations, and we have already received approval from the New York State Independent System Operators that we will be doing tours of their facility as well. They're the ones that help us manage the grid. So with that, we'll get started. Once again, our presenters, today we're being moderated by Donovan Gordon, so I'm going to flip this over to Donovan.
Well, thank you very much, Christine, and thank you everyone for joining this Lunch and Learn. I am going to be very brief because I am not the expert in this, but we're going to talk about geothermal, renewable energy credits, GRECs, in a really wonderful way to help fund and finance geothermal projects. So actually in the order that they will speak, and this will be a discussion. I think Kelsey has some slides to give you a high level understanding of what GRECs are. So she's going to lead us off. Ryan is going to talk about GRECs from sort of a national perspective and some of the other states that have implemented or looking to implement legislation around GRECs. And then we got Brian picking everything up at the end and talking about what we're doing in New York as it relates to getting GREC legislation passed. So I will pause here and turn it over to Kelsey to teach us about GRECs.
Thank you, Donovan. Christine, do you have the slide? I don't think I have a share option on.
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let you share.
Okay, and I am not a Zoom expert. Where is the share button on here?
So it's at the very bottom. There's a box with an arrow in it that says share.
Thank you. Yes.
There you go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If I haven't met you, I'm Kelsey Klein. I'm the Senior Manager here at Carbon Solutions Group. We're a leading REC aggregator working in more than 20 states, and we do work directly with geothermal contractors, distributors, manufacturers, and system owners in order to register and manage and monetize RECs. So before we dive into any of the state specifics, we're going to just cover some basics of RECs and GRECs. So starting off with what is a REC. So it is a renewable energy certificate. Sometimes you'll also hear renewable energy credit, but it represents the environmental attributes of 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy generation. The key thing to understand is that the REC is separate from the energy that's being produced or saved itself. So one analogy that I actually like to use is if you're going to a grocery store and buying an apple, you see apples, inorganic apples, and the apple is like the energy itself, and the labels on there tell you about how that apple was produced. So we like to think
warn Kelsey about
apple. What was that?
Travaco wasn't muted.
And now he's muted.
So we like to think of the organic apple sticker as being the REC. So it is something that you could peel off and sell separately from that energy or the apple itself. And it is something that is now worth value. So keeping on that that thread of thought there. So energy is still being generated and consumed. Same in the apple analogy. You could eat that apple, you could sell it, make apple juice with it. Whatever you do with the energy or the apple itself is totally separate than what you're doing with that REC. And it can be something that is separated and it's tracked and sold independently. Why RECs exist is because utilities and companies purchase RECs, and they do that in order to meet their sustainability goals, which is something that through legislation is set through the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or the RPS. So who benefits from RECs? For homeowners or just system owners in general, commercial owners can also participate in this. It's an additional revenue stream. So REC has a monetary value, which is designed through the RPS about how much a REC costs, which we'll get into some of the other markets and what we can expect to see the value of a REC be. Installers also benefit because it's an additional value proposition for their customers. Utilities benefit because they are gaining compliance with their renewable energy requirements, and states are benefited by encouraging the adoption of whatever technology is backed by that REC. So as we call them GRECs, that is specific to a geothermal system. And the REC process itself is fairly simple. Once a system comes online, it is operational, then you would go through a verification process. It's something that REC aggregators often help do. Sometimes the homeowners can do it themselves as well. But they would get their whole system certified, and then they would track it with a regional tracking system. New York has their own, the East Side has their own. There's a lot of different tracking systems out there. But what it does is verifies that renewable energy credit, or the REC, is specific to that technology, that it's eligible to meet the RPS requirements, and that it is only one of them exists. It's not being double counted anywhere else. And then what happens is those RECs are transacted. So as a REC aggregator, we directly purchase those from homeowners. Some other states require that it happens directly through utilities. So that is a different way of methodologies that we'll go through. But for overall basics, mostly what you need to know is that one REC is equal to 1 megawatt hour of energy. And this is something that we're looking to adopt through a bunch of the state legislations. But I will turn that over to Ryan on that note to talk about what the different states are doing.
Thanks, Kelsey. I appreciate that. It's always, I always rely on Kelsey for like the mechanics of REC creation and transfer and retirement. And I have to say that Carbon Solutions Group has been an incredible partner as we have sought to implement and see some of these programs through at the state level. I have to confess, I wasn't really involved with the Maryland effort, and there is a elected official in the Commonwealth, Delegate Lorig Charkoudian, who, if you are familiar with her, you know that she is a force of nature and a bit of a geothermal proponent. Not even a bit. She's a major geothermal proponent, and thanks to her tenacity and focus on getting GRECs into law in Maryland, I think that state really became the model for others. And then the process moved over to Virginia, and there was legislation passed in that state to foster and see GREC program through. A little bit different than what happened in Maryland, though. The Maryland Energy Administration, I think that they wanted to figure out, largely at the behest of Delegate Charkoudian, the most simple and straightforward way to develop a REC program. And so they leaned on an existing industry tool for modeling geosystems and ascertaining the renewable energy that was sort of attendant with those systems. Virginia looked at Maryland and said, no, we're going to do this quite a bit differently. And the process was handed from the legislature upon enactment to the Virginia State Corporation Commission, it's the regulator in the state, similar to the New York Public Service Commission or the Illinois Commerce Commission. The Virginia State Corporation Commission did not want to do it as easily as Maryland, and they said to stakeholders, we think we need to meter all of these systems because remember, for solar rack, it's pretty simple. You're already going to be monitoring at the inverter level what you're producing and relaying that information to a rec aggregator like CSG or to sort of an administrator at the utility or grid network like PGM is not that complicated. It's, I've got solar on my home and I can look on my phone right now and tell you what I'm generating. It's pretty easy. A little trickier for geothermal and for us to contemplate BTU meters on 3-ton residential systems, we we thought this is going to really complicate the program and we would love to forestall this. So that's when we entered into what became a year of negotiations with the SCC and other key stakeholders and officials within Virginia state government. And we ultimately came to uh, a, a sort of a tiered approach where if the systems are smaller, if they're residential systems, I can't remember what the threshold is, but let's just say under 10 tons, you would have a deemed or prescribed sort of determination of your renewable energy. Because what the state really wanted to do was segregate the renewable thermal aspect of the equipment and of the system from the electrons that are going into the system to power it. And so, while their insistence on BTU meters was maybe a little misguided at the outset, I was very gratified and I'm very grateful to Water Furnace who stepped up with their Symphony Insight platform, which is a cloud connected monitoring platform that has, I think at this point, over 15,000 units connected to it. And so that was the proof that the State Corporation Commission really needed to see what across a number of systems in different regions of the state, different sizes, different capacities of those systems, they were able to see like across a spectrum of systems what the performance was like, what the renewable characteristics were, what BTUs were being harvested from the earth essentially. And then they were able to essentially create a model, a rough estimate, an average of what a residential system was going to be producing and how it was going to be interfacing with the grid. So for systems over a certain size, there are really three tiers in Virginia. The residential scale, sort of a middle tier, which is in the light commercial range, and I think that there needs to be some monitoring of the system performance. It does not have to be BTU metering, but then when you do get up to much larger systems, I think that there is a requirement for some sort of thermal monitoring. So that the experience in Virginia, while it was a little frustrating, all the back and forth and the constant meetings with SEC, I think we ended up at a very good place. And at the end, what we have, we believe, is a model for validation of the renewable aspects of geosystems that doesn't have to be reinvented in other states. So we really think that other states like New York, if they see fit to pass and implement GREC programs, you could rely on the work that was done in Virginia with an array of stakeholders to sort of undergird and support the program in New York. So I was talking to our friends at CSG, and there's a guy at the company, Michael Daly, who I think is their head of government relations, and he said to me, "Why don't we give this a shot in Illinois?" And I certainly perked up because I worked in Illinois state government for many years. I I'm in Springfield, the state capital. Right now I'm just a block away from the Capitol, and so I was tickled to contemplate the opportunity of going back and running in my old circles. And so we got going. CSG hired a lobbyist. Geo Exchange, we hired a lobbyist, some guys that I used to work with in state government. And although, 11 years had passed, not a thing had changed over in the state house. It was a lot of the same people. And it was quite fun to go back and testify in Senate and House legislative hearings and talk to them about the potential benefits of a GREC program and what this technology is at its core. And I think some of those lessons are applicable and have relevance to New York. The same playbook is gonna have to be run, and I think some of the same obstacles are gonna have to be overcome because, well, for somebody who's a geothermal advocate, I just think, we're gonna tell people what this is and what we do, and the light bulb will go off and they'll be bought in 100%, but it's not so simple. And while we were able to get some early wins and build a trajectory quite quickly, uh, the knives came out for us a little bit. The Illinois last year was working on a major energy and climate omnibus package. Not unlike what New York did a number of years ago with the CLCPA, but this was a grid modernization package, an energy affordability package, and there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen and a lot of competition for bandwidth and buy-in on the part of state legislators. And so I was spending time at the Capitol, and folks, I'd introduce myself and say I was advocating on behalf of the geothermal heating and cooling industry, and folks would say, "Oh yeah, everybody's talking about geothermal. That TENS bill, we got to do that." And I thought, yeah, yeah, we got to do the TENS bill, but are you saying we have to pick one? We can't do GRECs the same? And people were saying, no, you got to pick one. We're only doing one geothermal thing. And so it came to this point where we weren't in opposition to the TENS bill. We knew we had to get that done, but we also needed a nearer term policy and focus. And what we zeroed in on was really the grid benefits of geothermal. And I think that the growing body of evidence as to the grid impacts and the grid benefits of geothermal is really what won the day for us in Illinois. The opponents said this will raise consumer rates, and we are not going to do that during a time of an energy affordability crisis. And our counter to that was rates are going to go up one way or another. Do you want to mitigate the gravity and the scope and size of those rate increases? Because geothermal deployment puts downward pressure on rates. New-York-GEO, more than any other organization, has enunciated things like the inverse cost shift. And the fact that you putting geothermal in your home doesn't just save you money, it benefits your neighbors who don't even have geothermal because of the reliability it offers to electric providers. And that argument carried a lot of water. And I should also say that we did not do this in a vacuum without building a coalition of support. And I know that New York GEO has achieved so many amazing things in Albany and throughout the state due to the strength of the relationships that they have built over many years and the fostering of those strong collaborations and commitments on the part of external stakeholders. And that's what we had to do in Illinois. We had to get labor and environmental groups by our side. And if it weren't for them, if we did not have the support of the pipe fitters, the plumbers, the laborers, the operating engineers, and the Illinois Environmental Council, Sierra Club, and many others, it wouldn't have gotten done. But when we were able to help them understand how this means more jobs in the state, more highly skilled, good paying jobs, how it reduces emissions, we had the strength of a coalition behind us. And ultimately, many folks did not think it could be done. We got into the major package, the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, CERGA, they call it in Illinois. We got the Geothermal Homes and Businesses program in there. It pains me to say that this program will not go live until June of 2028. We're looking to get some interim guidance from the Illinois Commerce Commission and the Illinois Power Agency, who are going to be overseeing the program, so that geosystems that are going in this year and next year prior to the initiation of the program do actually ultimately qualify and are grandfathered in. So this initiative around geothermal rec programs, I think has some momentum, and I think can and should pass in New York, in New Jersey, hell, even in states that don't have an RPS. I've talked to CSG about this, and renewable. It is upsetting to me that sustainable energy, clean energy, renewable energy has become such a polarizing set of phrases. But something I've learned well in Washington is that you've kind of got to modulate your speech, your word choice, according to who you're in front of. And I think that we can go to states like South Carolina, or maybe even states like Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, and not call it a GREC program. We can call it a geothermal grid stabilization program. This concept has legs. And I think we are right at the verge of a greater understanding and comprehension of the benefits and the beneficiaries of geothermal deployment at scale. This stuff is so important for the future of our energy security and energy affordability. And I'm just really excited about what the future holds for these sorts of programs and for the future of our industry. So on that happy note, I'll pass it over to Brian, who has been intimately involved in on the ground in New York and has done a lot of work helping smooth the glide path for such a GREC program in New York State.
Thank you, Ryan. And hi, everybody. Brian Faris. I'm the manager of regulatory affairs at Dandelion Energy. And as Ryan sort of alluded to, New York's GREC legislation, I think, is probably say it's sort of standing on the shoulders of successful policies in Maryland, Virginia, and Illinois. It's really sort of a hybrid of the successes of those programs. As more and more states pass policies, the more and more each state learns, and then new states taking on that policy issue can learn what worked, what didn't, and fine tune those policies. I think it was last summer, the policy committee at NY-GEO was thinking about ways to further incentivize geothermal in the state. What are some policies that we could champion to make geothermal even more viable, to continue reducing the upfront costs? And We had shared some of our learnings in Maryland, where we're deploying projects, critically because of GRECs in that state, that they work, that they're easy to operate with, they provide the financial incentive that offsets the upfront costs, and they get projects on the ground. And so we talked about it, we kicked it around, decided that this was a policy that could fit in New York. And so we worked on a bill with CSG, with Michael Daly at CSG, with the rest of the policy committee. And we were successful in getting a bill filed with Senator Pete Harckham, who's been a geothermal champion in New York, and that's Senate Bill 9648. Obviously, anybody who's looking at a legislative calendar knows that that bill is not going to pass this session. And that is not something to be happy about, but it's not necessarily something to be sad about. The way that legislative cycles work, getting a bill filed is hard. Getting consensus around a bill to get it filed is hard. And it is the beginning of a conversation to get a policy passed. Most bills can take several years, several sessions. So sort of planting our flag in the ground by getting a bill actually filed is actually a win. And we'll be able to spend this summer and this fall sort of fine tuning that, building more consensus with other industries to make sure that the next time around that we can move it even further along. And so that bill looks a lot like the policies that are in Maryland, Virginia, and Illinois. It sets a carve out of the utilities renewable portfolio standards that a certain percentage needs to come from geothermal. And as Kelsey really helpfully highlighted, the way that they prove that compliance is through these certificates, these geothermal renewable energy certificates. Those are generated through the savings, through megawatt of savings, and then they're sold to utilities who retire those as proof that they've complied with the carve out. And those can be monetized in a number of ways. Those can be monetized by the system owner. They can create their own account on the trading system and list their credits for sale. They can work with companies like CSG who can do that for them. Or companies like CSG offer aggregation, where they buy the lifetime of the credits up front. And that's really an impactful tool for offsetting the upfront costs. When you can sell the lifetime of those credits, one, you don't have to manage them, month to month, year to year. You don't have to log onto your account to see, if somebody's bought them, what they're currently listing for, and manage the market. That can be managed by the pros, who have people to do that every day. And you can get that payment up front. And so the cost of your system can be reduced significantly. In Maryland, that upfront cost looks like about $3,200 a ton, $3,000 a ton. That's significant when you're talking about 2, 3, 4-ton systems to help offset costs. And so GRECs can prove to be an incredibly great industry tool to make the cost of geo get down comparable to traditional HVAC. So that's why it's good for the geothermal industry, but why and homeowners and customers. But why is that good for New York? Why should New York policymakers want something like this to pass? And a lot of it's already been mentioned. I mean, New York, like most other states, are facing affordability challenges. They're facing grid challenges, and the solutions that we've been looking at so far I think, are coming into question. And GRECs offer a new and innovative solution, another tool in the toolbox to help electrify the grid in a way that's affordable for New Yorkers. So geothermal, I think I don't need to go through it with this crowd, is far more efficient than conventional HVAC year round. It's particularly more effective during peak demand periods, and those peak demand periods are key. That's the period of the year that determines how much investment utilities are going to make in expanding their transmission and distribution. They've got to build to the potential highest peak. And as peak rises, their case to invest in more wires, more pipes goes up. And so, as Ryan really helpfully described, the more geo on the market, the lower that glide path is going to be to need to do those investments. It creates jobs, local jobs across the state. It provides savings for homeowners, for ratepayers, and it rewards performance. So you can tie it directly to the performance of the systems in what is being paid out to credits and to homeowners. So it's this sort of wraparound policy that I think is perfect right now for New York to handle electrification, to handle new data centers, new load on the grid, to make the system more affordable and more stable. So I think I'll leave it there. I'm starting to repeat a lot of the benefits of this that my fellow panelists have said. I think it's probably a good time to open it up to some questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kelsey, Ryan, and Brian. And I've seen some stuff going in the chat. And yes, that was me that thanked Bob for his feedback, but it was not me that had the question. So that's my twin here. That's I forwarded the link to John Joshi. So anyone can chime in. We can have a discussion. We have 20 minutes or so left. So let's fire away. Or if any of the panelists
your evil twin did pose a query in the chat.
Okay.
Have we considered a voluntary carbon market approach for the interim until GRECs are possible? We've seen that for universities. You stumped me, John. I don't know. I think it's worth exploring. I would welcome any participants, whether panelists or attendees, to tackle that one.
I don't have much knowledge background in voluntary carbon markets. I think my sort of amateur understanding of it is that it creates a platform for private companies to buy clean energy credits or carbon credits. And I don't know how those markets operate in other states, sort of what the dollar value provided for those credits is. Is it relatively consistent? Is it volatile? Does it swing with the economic times or the sort of ESG mandates at any company? I don't know.
Yeah, great points, Brian.
I think John's going to sort of explain a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a challenge obviously in setting that up, but we've seen that when we were looking at some revolving loan fund approaches in universities. In our research, we found like University of Champaign, Illinois, and others had monetized VCM credits. Now, obviously, the VCM market has evolved, and a lot of the credits that folks look at are in the red market, which in forestry and others. But there's still an opportunity, I think, for verifiable methodologies within the corporate framework who are looking to get those fitting into their ESG mandate. And we've seen that with some of the oil companies and others that contracted. I don't remember the two universities. I can forward that information, but those I think were purchased by the corporates in the oil and gas industry.
Okay. Thanks, John. That helpful.
The reason I'm saying it, geothermal systems, we're working toward that third-party ownership approach. We're looking at campuses, universities, hospital group within that TAP C. This becomes, as you look at a revolving loan fund approach, this becomes an additional benefit coming into the project financing to the universities. And if you can find a matching corporate purchaser, these are long-dated, verifiable credits. I think there's a strategy there while you're waiting for a legislative approach that may happen in 1, 2, 5, 10 years or whatever that time frame might be.
So Ryan, now we have two things to follow up on.
Okay, I'm all for it. It's just the value stack gets higher and higher.
Good.
So Bob has a question. Bob, I'll just go ahead and have you ask the question.
Well, actually, before Bob, I think Jerry had a question.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Jerry.
She says, Brian, could you specifically amplify how GRECs would be a good tool to handle data centers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a GREC policy would not specifically, be a tool that offsets data center load on the grid, or not something that data centers would buy and sell. But what the policy aims at doing is deploying more geothermal onto the grid, which reduces overall energy demand year round. And year round is important because data centers operate year round. They operate 24 hours a day. Geothermal is not intermittent, and neither are data centers. And so to the extent that we're reducing demand during shoulder seasons as well as peak seasons is important to grid stability. And we talk about data centers because data centers are adding load, and they're adding it rapidly. And so as load rapidly increases, so too should the deployment of geothermal. And GRECs are a tool to facilitate that widespread deployment.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah. So, Jerry, if I could also add, is that there is a bill on the floor now that is requiring data centers to have some type of renewable. And so the policy committee is reviewing that initiative and how we can support that and have geothermal written into the language of that bill.
Excellent, Christine. Thanks.
Okay. Now, Bob, you can ask your question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it was mentioned that it's possible to sell your lifetime GRECs to aggregators and such. I wonder if you could talk about how that mechanically works. Things like if I sell my GRECs to somebody, what obligations do I assume? If I don't run my system because maybe I took a 6-month vacation some winter and just ran it at minimal level, is that important? If I was to replace my personal geothermal system with maybe a 10 connection, and thus it's no longer a geothermal, is there any risk of clawback from whoever I sold my GRECs to? Sort of talk about some of the things like that.
I can take that question. For Carbon Solutions Group, at least, we do have obligations for delivery of RECs when it is an upfront purchase option. In most markets, we also have a market-based option, which is like a pay-as-you-go type of option. So if someone was worried about that, that is always a different option that they could choose. For the lifetime, few different things that come to mind there. First is when you talk about the variations in usage per year, that depends on the methodology that the state came up with and approved for the RPS. In Maryland, for instance, it's like an annual allotment that you're granted of RECs per year, not dependent on actual system usage. They look at your baseline of what you were using and how much you would save for the geothermal system, and you're just given an annual allotment. They don't actually monitor usage after that. Some other states, Virginia does have in theirs that larger systems would be based off of a monitoring system. In something like that, yes, there would be some risk of clawback should the system become unoperational, or should you be below the market. I know, at least for us, we usually give conservative estimates because we know that not everyone is going to be consistent with their energy usage or year over year. We also look at degradation, which is less as per geothermal system than when we look at like a solar system. So those are all accounted for, but that could be a risk, particularly if your system did become unoperational for any reason. You do have to report that it is unoperational, since you cannot claim RECs if that's the case.
Kelsey, can you say, does it go in the reverse too? If I generate more RECs than I expected, do I benefit from the upside there, or do you guys absorb that?
Yeah, same depends on your option there. If you were doing that upfront, again, we just look at overall base amount. So if we were estimated that your system was going to create 500 RECs in that lifetime, what we typically do is if you're short, we just extend it out. That's our number one method, is continuing on that obligation until it's met the minimum. We don't often do clawbacks unless severe situations where that system is inoperational year 5, you were paid maybe like a 20-year strip or something like that. But if you do overproduce, there is no additional anything additional for that. Again, right now it's all based off of an annual allotment, so we're not actually monitoring that usage and being able to say if you are producing above or below what the state has granted you.
Thanks, Kelsey. Anybody else have any other questions? No. John Chabacco must not be able to find his unmute button. He hasn't asked a question yet. So we have a question from Net. From the perspective of an installer, what is the best way to estimate the REC price and to demonstrate the value proposition to a customer?
So REC prices are generally available in an established market. For Maryland, we're definitively able to say like what the going price is currently. It does get a little tricky on like forward curves, depending on what the ACP, the alternative compliance penalty, is set at. Like New York currently doesn't have one. Generally, we are able to give a rough estimate of the price. The larger obstacle does generally become the quantity of RECs that a system is going to generate, because it involves more characteristics of the individual system. So really you have to solve for X based off of quantity of RECs and the price per X. But we generally advise against, on the solar end of things, we do often see where people look at current rates are $100. They're saying this is a 20-year contract, and they give this grandiose amount of if the market stayed exactly at the peak that it is today over that term, that it's going to be a very high amount for your REC value, when typically REC amounts in markets do come off. Most of them taper down over time. So we always try to be overly cautious and prepare people for that, knowing whatever the RPS has defined and what we are going to expect for trends in that market trending down.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Kelsey. Bob has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to repeat, I put this in chat, but I just wanted to emphasize it, that it's important to understand that RECs and equitable electric rates would be focused on rewarding two completely different sets of attributes. And it's important when arguing about either rates or RECs to try, if you're ever going to talk about having both, if you want both, be careful to segregate your arguments. Rates should reflect benefits that a system provides in terms of its utilization of the grid demand, timing, risk of coincident peak generation, et cetera. RECs, on the other hand, have traditionally been justified based on the attributes related to being renewable, okay, which would be the environmental, the health attributes, the avoidance of fossil fuels, dependency on foreign unfriendly governments and that sort of thing. These are completely different sets of attributes, and the risk is that if you use the same arguments for both, you'll be in a situation where you might get an improved, although still probably non-optimal electric rate. You'll try to argue about RECs, and people will say, "Oh, you've already got GRECs. You've already got the rates. You don't need the GRECs." Or the reverse will happen. If you get RECs, then people will say, "Well, you got RECs. You don't need rates." That would be double dipping. Where in fact it would not be double dipping if you've argued properly, because they are completely different sets of attributes, and each of them, the grid benefits are one thing. The environmental health and national security benefits of GRECs are another. Those are two separate things that should be rewarded independently and argued for independently. That's all.
Well, thanks, Bob, for bringing that up, and I'm glad you're on the policy committee for NY-GEO. You will help us through this.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Ryan, Brian, Donovan, Kelsey, for participating in today's Lunch and Learn. We appreciate your time, especially in putting this together and sharing with us the hard work that you guys are doing, not only in New York, but across the states to advance ground source heat pumps and geothermal. So we're all in this together. So thank you very much for doing that.
Awesome.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Our next Lunch and Learn is September 15th. We're going to take the summer off. I'm traveling in July, and August is just a busy time for everybody. So we'll circle back in September for a program on the ITC and the investment tax credits that will be presented by our friends at Walker Blue. And if you attended NY-GEO, you heard them speak. And if you attended ICHPA, you heard them speak as well. So it's very interesting. And hopefully we'll get this domestic content thing figured out for all of us by then.
Yeah, and Christine, I might mention one of Walker Blue's competitors, Whipfly, who was also at ICSPA, I think maybe at NY-GEO. They're a tax consulting firm. They are doing ICSPA's town hall, or their version of a Lunch and Learn tomorrow.
Okay.
And I think I can probably throw that registration link in the chat for anybody who might want it. Sorry to interrupt. Just
no, that's great. That's good. Yeah. And then just a reminder, the conference is April 26th to the 28th. And in case you don't know it, all of the content from the NY-GEO conferences is on our site. And we have, I think, 141 sessions now that are posted. And I'm going to put Brooklyn in here because there's a lot of conversation centered around the GRECs and the ITC tax credits and other things that are on there. So all the sessions are recorded, the voice as well as the slide decks, and then the archive of all of the other ones, all the past conferences since 2023. Are now posted as well. But you can find that all on our website under events.
I want to make one last comment since we ended with the tax credits. Ryan, let's go get that split ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say that
it works.
All right.
If there's, as we work through this, members will be reaching out to you, asking you for your support, either by signing something that we might be putting out there, or asking you to participate in something. So we appreciate everybody's support, and that's why NY-GEO is as strong as we are, is because of our members. So thanks, everybody.
Okay.
All right. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay.